So far, we've focused on listening, validation, and ways to resolve conflict and misunderstanding. These are without a doubt the heavy lifters when it comes to learning to communicate better, cultivate a sense of charisma and charm, and deepen interpersonal connections of all kinds. But in certain contexts, for example in business or in education, you don't just want to master receiving a message, you want to create your own message and make sure that it lands on its audience with the most influence and impact possible. In other words, there are times when you will want to persuade someone. To put it very simply, persuasion is trying to change someone's mind. A big part of being a masterful communicator is learning to genuinely receive, read, and understand other people and get inside their perspectives. In this final chapter, we'll be looking at our perspectives and exactly how we can communicate them so that others adopt them for themselves. All communication has a purpose, and at some point, that purpose will be to actively influence our audience, whether that's a single person reading our email, a team of our peers, or a hall filled with thousands of people. The golden rule in persuasive communication is, surprise, surprise, to know your audience. Luckily, in learning the previous chapter's skills of listening, validating, reading body language, etc., we've already gone some way to doing this. Before we continue, it's worth saying that persuasive communication does not mean manipulation. It means the artful and deliberate use of language to convey our meaning in a way that best achieves our purpose. It's an art that traces back to Aristotle, and arguably back even further to the very dawn of human communication. We might even guess that the primary reason for communication evolving in the first place was as a tool by which to influence and affect one another. Almost 2,000 years ago, Aristotle expounded on what he saw as the 4 primary strategies to reach and influence an audience. In his treatise, Rhetoric, during the 4th century BCE, he elevated persuasion to an art form. In Aristotle's time, oration was an honored art and tradition, and all educated men were expected to know how to correctly tailor their approach when addressing a group. 4 modes of persuasion. 1. Ethos. The first mode of persuasion is called an appeal to ethos, i.e., an address that rests on credibility to persuade. What do we mean by credibility? Anytime we trust and revere a professional or expert opinion, we do so because that opinion carries a certain credibility. We find it believable. We are persuaded by mastery and knowledge, which we assume belong to people who are in the know or who possess the right or the experience to speak on a certain topic. It's not just about qualifications or titles, however. A mother of 9's perspective on childbirth will tend to have more credibility than a random man's. However, that man, if he is, for example, a world-renowned obstetrician, may have as much or more credibility, on certain aspects of childbirth at least. Ethos is a question of reputation, authority, and trustworthiness. It's about the social standing and knowledge of the person speaking, rather than just the words they're saying. Marketers use this mode of persuasion when they dress an actor in a white lab coat and make him stand in front of a board covered with scientific-looking diagrams and charts in order to sell you toothpaste. A motivational speaker may successfully use an appeal to authority in the same way, showcasing certain clothing, styles, postures, ways of speaking, and attitudes that convey their authority to speak on their topic. Indeed, many gurus and cult leaders have so mastered an appeal to ethos that whatever they say is perceived with reverence and credibility simply because of the way they've presented that appeal and how they've positioned themselves as experts, whether they are or not. Examples of ethos: a doctor promoting a certain brand of cigarette in an ad, a well-connected older celebrity talking about the problems in the film industry, an older and wiser mentor giving you advice in your career. 2. Pathos. An appeal to pathos is entirely different. Pathos is about emotional persuasion, and considering how easy it is for emotion to override duty or logic, this mode can be very powerful indeed. But it's perhaps because of how easy it is to use that this form of persuasion is usually less respected than other forms. Think about a cheesy advert for an animal charity that obviously and blatantly pulls on your heartstrings. The audience may feel sorry about the images of sad puppies and kittens, but they're also keenly aware of the emotional manipulation, which means the tactic could just as easily backfire. But when pathos is used well, it works well. It requires that the speaker has a deep and sophisticated understanding of who their audience actually is, what their desires are, and what their deepest needs could be. Then they speak to that. If the audience is known to value, for example, freedom and independence, then the argument is framed in these terms. The speaker might choose to frame their argument or narrative in terms that speak to these values, driving home the point that all free-thinking and autonomous individuals can't help but come to the very same conclusion they have. Of course, if your audience is also intelligent, they may sniff out the irony in this. On the other hand, you might want to speak to your audience's emotion so that you can counter it. For example, an inspiring speaker may keenly understand the fear and uncertainty the audience may be feeling, but choose words that counteract that unwanted emotion and inspire another emotion. In this case, let's say courage and decisiveness. The speaker will be really successful at inducing this state of courageousness if she understands the emotional position her audience is starting out at. When you use pathos, you're not constructing an argument or making a point based on logic, facts, or morals. You are appealing solely to the way people feel. If a lawyer wants the jury not to vote against his client, he will try to cultivate feelings of pity, compassion, and forgiveness. Or if the lawyer on the other side wants to achieve the opposite, he will try to speak of feelings of anger and injustice in the jury. Examples of pathos: a picture of a crying refugee child in an activist campaign, with an appeal for donations beneath it. Someone getting their way by playing cute or being sexy. A YouTube thumbnail with bold letters, "They're lying to you." 3. Logos. Finally, the appeal to logos is an appeal to logic or rationality, or, and this is important, the appearance of logic and rationality. An argument presented with research to back it up and a logical, internally consistent argument to make its point is making an appeal to logos. Anytime you bring up proof, evidence, reasoning, facts and figures, or even common sense, you are appealing to logos. One broad type of argument you can make is one that rests on deductive reasoning. This is essentially the scientific method. You start out with a tentative theory to explain something. This inspires a hypothesis. You do an experiment or make observations, and depending on what you find, you come to conclusions. You begin with the broad and general, and deduce the specific. Incidentally, this is not the form of reasoning most used by Sherlock Holmes. A simple example of deductive reasoning is, all Greeks are philosophers. Premise 1. Aristotle is Greek. Premise 2. Therefore, Aristotle is a philosopher. Conclusion. As you can see, deductive reasoning is about the form of the argument, not the content. The above argument is valid, i.e., it follows logically in structure, but it isn't sound, since the premises are not true. For an argument to be sound, both the premises and the conclusion need to be true. An argument can be valid, however, without either premises or conclusion being true. Inductive reasoning goes the other direction, i.e., it uses specific observations to move to a more general theory or principle. For example, every Greek person I've met so far has been a philosopher. Therefore, this person I've just met, who is Greek, is probably also a philosopher. Of course, the quality of the conclusion in an inductive argument rests on the quality of the observations. If you've only ever met 2 Greeks in your life, for example, your conclusion is quite a weak one. You can recognize and appeal to logic by reference to science, to rationality, or to facts and figures, or, again, the appearance of such things. Examples of logos. A government-funded pamphlet says, 1 out of every 5 students reports being bullied at school. A doctor releases a paper on sulfites in the diet, and it's published in a journal. A woman wearing a pantsuit and a lanyard asks people in a hotel lobby to move somewhere else. They do. 4. Kairos. Kairos is the 4th of Aristotle's modes, and one that might be a little harder to understand from a modern perspective. Kairos can be broadly translated to mean opportunity or right time in Greek. This is an appeal that rests heavily on when it's made, i.e., it's about identifying the perfect moment to launch the message. Sometimes your audience is most receptive after a particular event or realization. If you present your case then, it has the best chance of being received. For example, politicians often wait for some negative event to pounce with a pre-prepared message that the public will be far more willing to accept than if it had been proposed at any other time. Likewise, you might wait for a friend to be in a calm, relaxed state of mind before broaching a delicate topic with them. Kairos is about appropriateness. It's about being aware of who your audience is, where and when you're addressing them, and in what context. How are people currently feeling? What came before? What is the environment? And how does this impact the degree to which people can hear and understand you? Examples of Kairos? Advertising wrinkle cream to people in the weeks leading up to their birthdays. Going to console your crush right after they've broken up with their current partner. Addressing a room full of parents, you start your speech with a sweet joke about your 4-year-old nephew. Using the 4 modes of persuasion. It's not that any of the 4 modes is better or more effective than any other. It's more a question of knowing your audience and knowing exactly which mode will work best for them. That's important. It's not about which mode fits you best or fits your message best. It's about putting your message in a form that your audience is most likely to hear and register. The skill of a great and persuasive orator, then, is not about how well they can communicate, but how well they can communicate to their chosen audience. Let's consider an example. Let's say you're in your workplace. You're trying to make a case for using some newly available funds to get everyone signed up for a training course. Since others have their own ideas for what to do with this money, you need to actively persuade people round to your point of view. How? You might have a word with your immediate supervisor first. Knowing a little about them, you guess that an argument to emotion would work best. You ask, what do they need currently, and what is their most pressing emotion? Realizing that they have been irritated for a long time about picking up the slack of less qualified staff, you tailor your argument to appease this sense. If we all completed this training, it would not only boost morale and build up team cohesion, it would also empower everyone with some new skills so we're better able to cope. You might not blatantly say, and that will lead to less work for you, but you are speaking to their emotion, irritation, and arguing in a way that they will likely hear and resonate with. You dwell on the positive emotional benefits of your plan. Just think, no more having to fix up other people's mistakes, and present your argument as a solution to their pains. However, if you were speaking to a fellow colleague who already felt overburdened and might not be interested in taking on a new training program, you might decide to appeal to authority instead. Crucially, you have to think of who your colleague actually considers an authority. You decide to frame your argument as personal development and mention that their favorite self-help guru recommends ongoing career development as a question of self-respect and autonomy. Later on, when you have a chance to address the entire office, which constitutes a mixed group, you lean more heavily on an appeal to time, place, and appropriateness, kairos, and present a more generally appealing argument that will speak to everyone more broadly. Being keenly aware of your workplace's culture, you deliver an argument you know is in keeping with the overall tone, mood, and style. It's likely in life that you'll have to make a compelling argument that includes elements of all these persuasive modes. In that case, here are a few tips. To establish your credibility, ethos, lead with your genuine credentials, experience, and expertise, and don't oversell them. If you cannot establish credibility yourself, refer to someone else who does have that authority. The best and most authentic way to appeal to pathos is to share your heartfelt and honest personal experiences. If they're unique to you and yet somehow speak to universal themes, all the better. Be mindful of not appearing emotionally manipulative, however, and try to steer clear of inciting guilt or fear in others. Another way to appeal to pathos is to be vulnerable. Share a secret, open up, and go first, emotionally speaking. It will create a sense of trust and shared humanity. Pathos can also be addressed by using vivid metaphors and colorful, even poetic language. If you're impassioned about something, share it. Let your raw enthusiasm and energy shine through. If your argument needs a little more logos, don't underestimate the power of some hard data. Statistics, graphics, and concrete values, money can be especially effective, can make the point quickly and neutrally. Whatever mode you're using, begin any message by capturing attention. Then, consider closely what your audience's need is and speak to that. Start with the problem, outline your argument, and then paint a vision of the future where they behave or believe as you'd like them to, i.e., their problem has been solved. Your argument is essentially a demonstration of why your idea is, in fact, a way for them to get their needs met. The office.